and get everything started today. Thank you, Tanya. So our recording is started. Again, welcome everyone to our information session on the recently released competitive solicitation for enhancing services to culturally specific populations. Just a little bit of information before we do get started. If you have any questions today, please feel free to put them into the chat section. We'll be monitoring that throughout the session today. If there are questions that we can answer, we will answer them. If it's something we can't answer, we will have to circle back and answer that. However, everything that you asked today in the chat will be posted to our Q&A document that we keep, and that will also be posted on our page, which you'll have all that information in the solicitation as well as some information later on. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so again, this is the information session for the Stop Violence Against Women, Enhancing Services to Culturally Specific Populations. Just a brief agenda for today. We'll begin by briefly introducing PCCD and the Office of Victim Services. We will also introduce the Federal Stop Violence Against Women Formula Grant Program and explain what their relationship is to the Enhancing Services to Culturally Specific Populations competitive solicitation that was released. We will also provide an overview of the requirements of the solicitation, and we will also explain PCD's competitive application process. So again, we're going to start with the overview for PCCD. So PCCD is a small state agency under the Office of the Governor. Our mission has 3 parts. The first one is we enhance coordination and quality of criminal and juvenile justice systems. We facilitate delivery of services to victims of crime and increase the safety of Pennsylvania communities. So how does PCCD accomplish the mission? The commission is small, but its work is far-reaching. The commission itself is made up of people appointed by the governor who are there to represent all aspects of criminal and juvenile justice, victim services, state agencies, and even representatives from the general public. We have several advisory committees that meet quarterly, and they too have some of their membership appointed by the governor. These advisory committees are responsible for planning and reviewing information and ultimately advising the commission on the projects that it funds. The staff of PCCD are the people who assist the advisory committees by preparing information and carrying out their recommendations. We do the day-to-day work of administrating the millions of dollars in state and federal funds that flow through the commission. The Office of Victim Services is one of the offices that operates under PCCD. Like the name suggests, it exists to help victims of crime. The Office of Victim Services has 2 parts. The first is the Victims Compensation Assistance Program, or VCAP, that you might have seen. This office helps offset the expenses associated with being the victim of a crime. And then the second part of the Office of Victim Services is the one that has released this Enhancing Culturally Specific Services funding announcement that we are learning about today. And that is the Victim Services Program. The Victim Services Program oversees state and federal funding intended to support services to victims of crime. We do that by providing grants to government and nonprofit agencies at a local level. So what is this STOP grant program? It's important that applicants for this solicitation understand that the money in the enhancing services for culturally specific communities comes from the federal Stop Violence Against Women program. The purpose of this federal grant program is to improve criminal justice system responses to domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and to increase direct services for victims of these crimes. Under the federal STOP program, emphasis is placed on supporting direct services to linguistic and culturally marginalized communities. So what exactly is meant by direct services? Direct services are services that respond to the emotional, psychological, or physical needs of crime victims. They assist victims in stabilizing their lives after victimization. And it also assists victims to understand and participate in the criminal justice system. Direct services can also restore a measure of security and safety for the victim. Under STOP, here is a list of what is meant by direct services. This can be crisis intervention, supportive counseling, accompaniment in any of the systems, juvenile justice systems, healthcare, immigration, financial systems. Direct services also includes language access, emergency housing systems, safety planning, assistance in completing the victims' compensation assistance process and forms. It can also be transportation assistance, and then legal advocacy is also considered a direct service under STOP. Um, Again, this solicitation has to do with being victim-centered and trauma-informed. So what exactly does that mean? Any service funded with STOP funds has to be victim-centered and trauma-informed. And that's done by empowering victims to prioritize their rights and needs. Here's a list of what trauma-informed services can do, and it acknowledges that trauma is common in the population. It recognizes signs of trauma and how it may show up in victim behavior, which means that if they're acting a certain way, it may be that their past trauma has caused these actions and behaviors. And it also makes sure that services are done in a way that does not re-traumatize people as you are assisting them through these services. To get kind of more specific to this solicitation has 1,125,000 available over a 3-year project period, which is January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2028. We'll go into more detail about this later, but the application should only reflect the budget for the first year of this project. Recipients for funding will be able to possibly receive year 2 and year 3 funding contingent on project progress. But again, that's something that we'll discuss a little bit later as well. The goal of this is to establish, expand, or maintain culturally relevant direct services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. PCCD does expect to fund up to 3 initiatives for this project, and it will not exceed a total of $375,000. The last bullet point that we want to make on here is that eligible applicants must meet the federally established criteria for a culturally specific community-based organization. So what exactly is meant by culturally specific? The focus of this solicitation is on enhancing and/or increasing the availability of direct services to culturally specific communities. Federal guidelines governing STOP define culturally specific as primarily directed toward racial and ethnic minority groups. Examples on this are such groups such as American Indians, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, Blacks, Hispanics, and more information can be found in the federal guidelines. The federal guidelines governing STOP define a culturally specific community-based organization as a private, nonprofit organization whose primary purpose is to provide culturally specific services, again, to the racial and ethnic communities that were listed on the previous slide as well. So what exactly are we trying to accomplish with this solicitation? In Pennsylvania, there are 2 state coalitions. One is the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or PCADV, and the other one is Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect, or PCAR. Each county has a designated PCADV or PCAR and or PCAR designated sexual assault center. So between the 3 organizations, we collaborate to make sure that there are accessible services for all victims. We acknowledge that some victims may be hesitant about going to a mainstream program. This culturally specific population initiative is about creating collaboration and services that culturally and linguistically underserved victims will feel comfortable using. So what are the differences between what might be considered a culturally specific victim service program and a mainstream victim services program? For culturally specific, it is a organization that was created by and for a specific cultural community. They tend to understand how the life experiences and cultural perspectives of victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking affect the way that services are structured and provided. Leadership and staff of these organizations generally reflect the cultural community being served as well. On the flip side, mainstream victim service organizations have greatly evolved over the last 50 years in response to the needs of a majority of the population. Um, it reflects the life experiences and cultural perspective of victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking who lived in the U.S. And leadership in these organizations may not reflect the culturally or linguistically specific community that it does serve. Right, so next we are going to get into the application specific requirements for this funding solicitation. So this solicitation has 3 parts, and we're going to go over each of them in a little bit of detail. So the first section is the funding announcement document. The purpose of the funding announcement document is to give you an overall picture of the types of projects that PCCD is looking for, the specific due date for the application, instructions for submitting questions to PCCD staff, and an overview of federal and state program and grant administration requirements. Please take the time to read through it. It is very important that you do read through the funding announcement document as a whole. The second piece is the reference document that you need to complete before you bring up the SurveyMonkey form. You will want to complete the questions on the reference document so that you can kind of cut and paste them then into the SurveyMonkey. You will also need to gather information that proves that your organization has a nonprofit status, and you'll have to include that in the SurveyMonkey then once you do bring that up. The third and final piece is the proposal narrative template. This is where you will provide the substance of your application and a majority of the information. The template guides you through all of the sections necessary to complete and submit your application. It is set up so that you can type directly into it. It's a Word document. You'll be able to put all the information in there, and you will want to save it to your computer so that you can attach it to the SurveyMonkey form. So for the application sections, the applications for the enhancing services to culturally specific populations are scored using a 100% point value system. On the right side of this slide is a breakdown of how each section will be scored. And the organizational eligibility appears in the SurveyMonkey, and then the other 3 scored portions are in the Word document that gets attached to the SurveyMonkey. When you're going through each of these sections, they are also labeled with the point values in the specific sections of the application. So we're going to go into more detail about what is in each of these sections so that you can kind of prepare information that you need to gather to complete these sections. So the applicant information section in the SurveyMonkey includes basic information about your organization. We're also requesting contact information for a primary contact and also a secondary contact. The application section also includes a readiness checklist, which may be very helpful to you if you're a smaller organization that hasn't requested funding from PCCD before. It just affirms that your organization can manage funds from PCCD, and it gives you a little bit more information of what to expect. The scored section in the SurveyMonkey is the applicant eligibility. And this just goes over what population your organization serves. It's verification of your 501c3 status, your organizational board of directors, some information on them, your mission statement, what services your organization provides, and then what county your organization serves. The other sections in the SurveyMonkey include an executive summary. There's a specific script that's included with this section, so you'll be able to just fill it in. The example of it is here on the slide. You'll just be able to fill it in. It kind of just goes over briefly of the amount that you're requesting and bullet points of what your project's primary purpose is. And then the other part of it is the stop specific requirements. So under the Federal Violence Against Women Acts, or VAWA, civil rights provisions, recipient agencies can't exclude, deny any benefits to, or discriminate against any person based on actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability, in any program or activity funded in whole or in part by the Office on Violence Against Women, or OVW. All stop-funded organizations must meet the statutory requirement to comply with the confidentiality and privacy provisions of VAWA as amended. So this section goes over that information, and you will basically affirm that you understand what this would entail if you do decide to receive money from this solicitation. If you don't have a current policy that meets these requirements, and you do end up possibly receiving funding, it will be a requirement that you will have to develop these policies in order to meet with these specific requirements.
And I just wanted to mention, this is Natalie Novotny-Goals, I'm Des' supervisor, but we would work with you and help you develop that policy. Okay?
Yep.
Thanks, Des.
Absolutely. Yep. So the next part of this, we're going to go over some of the required attachments in SurveyMonkey. The first document that will be required, and we're going to go over this in a lot more detail, is the Stop Culturally Specific Grants Proposal Narrative and Budget Table. Like I said, we're going to go over each of these sections in this required attachment later here in the PowerPoint. Another required attachment is the documentation verifying your 501c3 status. We also give you the option for some optional attachments in the SurveyMonkey. This can include any letters of support that you might have from local member agencies of PCADV or PCAR. If you have worked with them previously and you have worked with the mainstream organizations in your area and you're planning on partnering with them, those organizations could write you a letter of support and you could attach those. The space in the SurveyMonkey also allows you to upload a short 2 to 5 minute video about your organization. And then any other supplemental information that you'd want to include, you'd be more than welcome to. That can include any video files, photos, newsletters, photos. And then we also provide a text field that you could link a YouTube video or anything like that. If you'd want to include anything just to give us more information about your organization, you'd be more than welcome to do so. So for the required attachments, these next couple slides are going to go into more detail about the grant proposal and budget table required attachment. Applicants seeking these funds are required to complete and upload the proposal narrative and budget table as part of the online SurveyMonkey request submission. This has to be included in order to be considered for funding. This template does give you all the questions. All of the questions are required to be completed in order to be considered. The narrative, once you get it all typed out, should be no more than 15 pages in length. That's for 12-point font, double-sided, 1-inch margins, the standard that you usually have in a Word document. And then the attachment can either be in Word or PDF file formats. As you work through the template, please ensure that you are as detailed as possible in your responses, while also being mindful of the page limit that it does have. So the first section in this required attachment is the problem description. The problem description is worth 30 points when it is competitively scored. This section should address what problem or problems your project would like to address. It should also provide any current barriers that victims you serve face while trying to access these services. And also, it should provide details on how your services will help victims address these barriers. The next section, which has the most points attached to it, is the project description. This basically provides all of your goals for the project. What do you want to accomplish during your grant? You can list all those out. There's a space for you to do that, and then what steps you'll take to accomplish these goals. You could provide which VAWA crimes your project will respond to, what services you will provide through the grant. This section should also provide details of what specific plans or tasks your organization will do to meet the goals, and how will you customize those services to meet the cultural and language needs of your target population. And then also, what will you do to ensure that your project is trauma-informed and victim-centered? And lastly, this section also asks, what outcomes will you measure to know if your project is working? Again, this probably will be a bulk of your narrative because it's worth the most points. So this one does have a lot of information that's contained in it. The last section of this is the budget table. This is worth 15 points for the competitive solicitation. This section will include kind of your quote best estimate for costs to be budgeted by category. Your budget should not exceed 125,000, and this only includes the budget for year one of your proposed project. The proposed budget description section also includes space for you to include a clear justification on how the cost or expense is connected to your project. So for example, if you're funding like personnel costs or, certain other things, you'd be able to explain how that specific cost would meet the goals and what they would be providing to the project. Just a brief overview on the review and award process for this solicitation. Applications do close on Monday, April 14th, 2025 at 8 p.m. After it closes, the applications will be reviewed by a trained team of reviewers from PCCD and also other outside agencies. Once they're reviewed, and the reviewers score them, up to 3 projects will be recommended for funding, and those projects will be notified sometime between August and September of this year. Those approved projects will then be required to complete and submit an e-grants application in order to receive a grant award. PCCD utilizes the e-grants application, which is an online system, which allows you to kind of put all the information all together in one space. And that's also how we monitor them and track them. So if, you do receive this funding or an offer to receive this funding, you will have to set up an e-grants account as well. Applicants will then be expected to submit those specific e-grants applications within 45 days of notification or possibly risk forfeiting the award. After this submission, successful applicants will work with PCCD staff to correct any issues in their application, review fiscal requirements, and ensure applicants understand all federal grant requirements prior to accepting award. But again, this is something that PCCD and you as the applicant will work closely together to get all this accomplished. If there's some things you don't understand about the process or certain federal requirements, we will take the time to assist you with making sure you understand them before, you do fully accept the award. And just a few general tips. Make sure you read the funding announcement, the SurveyMonkey, and the narrative budget document thoroughly before you start writing your application. The presentation today, it doesn't kind of substitute for the full text of the solicitation. This is kind of meant as like a supplement to the 3 big documents that we have out for the solicitation. Also, don't assume that the person that is reviewing your application knows a lot about your organization or community. Feel free to put those details in, even if it seems like it's small. It might be something that the reviewers need to kind of understand what community you serve or where you come from, to just kind of see what services you're providing to this community. Like I mentioned before, this is a competitive application. After today, if you have any questions once you get off the webinar today, you have to email any funding announcement questions to the RA-OVS-stopgrants@pa.gov. With the Stop Violence Against Women Formula Grant, enhancing services to culturally specific populations in the service line. Once you send those in, we review them, and then they do get posted on the Q&A document, which then gets posted onto our PCCD website. The last day to submit any questions for this solicitation is April 9th, 2025. And then any additional resources for applicants on PCCD grant readiness can be found on page 8 of the funding announcement. Again, read through the funding announcement. There's a lot of information in there, and everything then is also posted on our PCCD website under the funding announcement tab. And that is what I have for you today. So thank you for joining us. Let me come back in so I can see everybody. stop sharing. And I will leave this up we'll stay here for a couple minutes to kind of answer some questions if we are able, or if anybody has any questions that they would like to put into the chat that they haven't put in yet, we'd be more than happy to answer those for you if we can. Natalie, did we get all the questions in the Q&A in the chat? You're on mute.
I believe so.
Okay.
I would also encourage anybody on this call, take a look at our website, particularly how to apply for funding, etc., because we have a lot of information on there that you can look at that is technical assistance in nature about our processes and applications. And that could be very helpful to you if you decide to apply for this. The everything, including the due date, all the specifics are in the funding announcement. And Tanya, who also works here with us at PCCD in our office, she just posted the link to the funding announcement. And if you go to PCCD's website, we also directly on the front page, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a link for all that gives you a link to everything that PCCD has open right now. Okay, if you come up or as you go through this, if you come up with more questions, there is a process that's outlined in the announcement. We have a resource account, and if you have questions after this, you just type your question into the resource account, and then we get it here at PCCD. We'll look at it, and then usually in about a day and a half, we post the answer out there. We won't let you know that we've answered your questions. So what you have to do is you have to go visit our webpage and go on the FAQs for this announcement, and then you'll see if the answer is posted. That's part of our, competitive process, because usually if you've got a question, it's probably occurred to other people. And that way, we can answer the questions that come in, and it can help other people too, and it keeps the process fair. There's another question here. Look, I have to say,
To an old question, that's all. It wasn't a
what's
new one.
that?
I just responded to one of the other questions.
Okay, thank you. I just want to emphasize, stop funding. You have to be identifying and serving victims. It can't just be prevention work. And I can't, we can't, from where we sit, we can't tell you whether your idea is fundable or not. All I encourage you to do is to go back, read through the solicitation, and then if you feel strongly that your idea and what you're proposing fits under that, then send an application in, okay? Because it's competitive, we really can't communicate with you or comment on the quality of your idea or whether it's fundable or not. Okay. Thank you all for being here. We were a little bit nervous about whether anybody saw that we put this out, but I think we're really pleased to see that we have quite a few of you who have expressed an interest, and we're excited about this work, and we look forward to see what you guys send in to us.